It was supposed to be a calm evening for the elderly woman who lived alone in her small, quiet home. She had just finished her tea, folded the blanket over her knees, and planned to watch the late-night news. Nothing felt unusual, until she heard the first loud thud against the front door. At first, she thought something had fallen outside. The wind sometimes pushed the garbage bin across the porch, but the second hit came sharper, stronger, and unmistakably human. Her heart skipped. She slowly stood up, confusion turning into fear. Then she heard the voice. A young woman's harsh, emotional cry. "Open the door. Open it right now." Her daughter, Dash-in-Dash-law. The elderly woman froze. They had never been close, but she had never heard her like this. The voice was filled with anger, frustration, and something else pained. The pounding continued, each hit jolting through the doorframe like a heartbeat out of control. She stepped back, hands shaking. "Please, calm down," she whispered through the wood. Though she knew the other woman couldn't hear her, the daughter-in-law kept shouting words blurred together, loud and desperate. The older woman couldn't understand what had happened to trigger such distress, but she knew something was terribly wrong. Inside the house, the lights flickered, as though reacting to the tension shaking the air. The woman reached for her phone, but realized she had left it in the kitchen. She didn't dare move far from the door. What if it suddenly burst open? Then something else added pressure to her chest, the sound of footsteps running fast across the driveway. For a second, she panicked. Was someone else coming? Was this going to get worse? But then she recognized the voice. "Mum, Mum, are you okay?" It was her son. He appeared on the porch, breathing hard, holding a crowbar, not in a threatening way, but in the cautious, protective manner of someone who had come prepared for anything. He had received a frantic voicemail from his wife earlier, followed by silence. Then his mother didn't answer his calls. He feared the worst. The daughter-in-law spun toward him, tears on her cheeks, frustration spilling out of her words. The older woman couldn't hear what she said, only the trembling of her voice. Her son gently raised a hand, motioning for her to step aside, calming her with slow breaths. He wasn't there to fight. He was there to understand. And behind the door, listening to both of them. The older woman wondered what truth was hiding beneath all this chaos. Something had broken inside that young woman, something she didn't know about, and this night was only the beginning. The older woman kept standing behind the door, listening to the tense voices outside. She tightly held the edge of a small table beside her, trying to keep her trembling hands steady. She had never seen her daughter-in-law in such a state. It didn't make sense. There had been disagreements before, more misunderstandings, awkward moments at family gatherings, but never anything loud or aggressive. This was different. This was raw emotion spilling out uncontrollably. Outside, her son gently guided his wife a few steps away from the door. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. Instead, he spoke in a calm, steady tone, one he reserved for moments when someone needed grounding more than scolding. "What happened?" he asked softly. His wife shook her head, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I didn't know where else to go," she said. I tried calling you." I tried calling her. No one answered. Inside, the older woman felt a sting of guilt. She had left her phone in the kitchen earlier. She didn't hear it ring. She wondered if the missed calls could have changed. What was happening now? Her son placed the crowbar down on the porch floor. He wasn't ashamed of carrying it. He had only grabbed it because he didn't know what situation he would walk into. But now that he understood, this was a moment of emotional distress, not danger. He pushed it far out of their conversation. His wife took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Her voice shook. "I felt like everything was falling apart today," she said. "I came here because I didn't want to be alone." Hearing this from behind the door, the older woman's heart softened. She had always assumed the younger woman was strong, confident, and never shaken. But now she realized something important. Nobody truly knows what someone else is carrying inside. "What happened today?" her son asked again, gently this time. For a moment, the young woman didn't answer. She looked down at the porch floor, her fingers twisting together. She seemed embarrassed, like she wished she had handled everything differently but didn't know how. Finally, she spoke. "I had a fight with your aunt earlier," she said. "She said things about me, things that hurt more than I expected." The older woman pressed a hand against her chest. Her son's aunt was known for having a sharp tongue, especially when she felt stressed, but she didn't realize her words had gone this deep. The daughter-in-law continued. "She said I wasn't doing enough. That I wasn't good enough. That I didn't fit into this family." Her voice cracked. The older woman behind the door felt a painful twinge. She had heard harsh remarks from that aunt before, directed at others. Never at Herb. She always brushed them aside. She didn't realize that someone younger, trying to find her place, might not have the same emotional armor. Her son exhaled slowly, understanding now. He reached out and placed a comforting hand on his wife's shoulder. "You didn't deserve to hear any of that," he said. None of it was true. But the younger woman's emotional storm hadn't passed yet. "I tried to call you," she said again. I needed someone, and when no one picked up, I panicked. My mind started racing. I didn't know where to go. I just drove here." She glanced toward the door with regret. "I wasn't trying to scare her. I just felt overwhelmed. I didn't know how to stop the emotions." Inside the house, the older woman finally took a step back. The situation wasn't about anger. It was about someone feeling lost, hurt, and unheard. She finally understood that what sounded like rage was really a cry for help, and she realized that this night was not going to end in blame. It could still end in healing if they all listened. Inside the house. The older woman finally gathered enough courage to move away from the door. Her legs felt stiff, as if the fear and tension had drained all her strength. She slowly walked toward the kitchen to retrieve her phone, partly to check the missed calls and partly to give herself a moment to breathe. As she picked up the phone, the screen lit up with a long list of missed calls from her son and several from her daughter-in-law. Her heart sank. She had never meant to ignore either of them. If she had answered, this entire scene might have been completely different. She returned to the hallway and placed her hand gently on the door. Outside, the muffled voices continued, calmer now, softer, filled with exhaustion rather than anger. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly unlocked the door. When it opened, both her son and daughter-in-law looked up. The porch light fell across their faces, showing the redness around the young woman's eyes and the concern etched clearly in her son's expression. The older woman didn't step outside. She simply held the door open a few inches, enough to show she wasn't afraid anymore and that she was ready to listen. Her daughter-in-law swallowed hard. I'm sorry," she said, voice wavering. "I never meant to frighten you." The older woman shook her head gently. "You didn't frighten me," she said softly, though they all knew she had been shaken. "I just want to understand what happened." The young woman looked at the ground, unsure where to start. For a few seconds, silence hung in the air. Even the usual night sounds, the crickets, the passing cars, seemed to fade away. Then, slowly, she finally opened up. "I've been feeling overwhelmed for months," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "trying to manage the house, work, expectations, everything. I felt like no matter what I did, someone found a reason to criticize me." Her son gently squeezed her hand, urging her to continue. "And today," she said, "when your aunt said those things, it broke something inside me. I know she probably didn't mean to hurt me, but her words stuck. They made me feel small, like I didn't belong anywhere." The older woman felt her chest tighten. She knew exactly what it felt like to be criticized unfairly. She had lived through many years of comments and expectations she never asked for. She had hoped her daughter-in-law would never have to experience the same. "Trovia, because this is the only place where I feel someone might understand me," the young woman continued. "I wasn't angry at you. I was just lost." Her son turned to his mother. "Mom," he said quietly, "we didn't come here for trouble. We came here because she needed support." The older woman nodded slowly, absorbing everything. Then, something unexpected happened, not dramatic, not loud, just honest. The daughter-in-law looked up, with tears forming again. "I've been carrying too much inside," she confessed. "I never told anyone how lonely I've been feeling. I didn't think anyone would take me seriously." That was the truth no one had seen coming. Not anger. Not conflict. Not resentment. Just a young woman who had been silently struggling, trying to hold herself together until she couldn't anymore. The older woman felt a deep ache in her chest, not from fear now, but from empathy. She stepped outside gently, her voice soft and steady. "You should have told me," she said. "I would have listened. I would have tried to help." The young woman wiped her cheeks. "I didn't want to be a burden." "Your family," the older woman replied. "You're never a burden." For the first time that night, something shifted, not in the doorframe, not in the porch light, but in the space between the three of them. It felt like the beginning of understanding. A moment where truth replaced confusion. A moment that could change everything moving forward. After the emotional silence settled over the porch, the older woman stepped aside and gently motioned for both of them to come inside. It was a small gesture, but an important one, an invitation to talk, not argue, to understand, not judge. They removed their shoes quietly by the door. The house felt warmer than the night outside, filled with the soft hum of the old ceiling fan and the faint smell of tea. The older woman led them to the living room, where the lamp cast a gentle glow over the space. No one sat immediately. They hovered awkwardly, unsure of how to begin again after such a tense start. The son finally broke the silence. "Mum," he said, "there's something I think you should know." His voice was steady, but there was weight behind it, something he had been holding back. His wife looked at him with surprise. She hadn't expected him to say anything more than what he already had, and the older woman felt her pulse quicken. She wasn't afraid, but she sensed that whatever he was about to share was important. He slowly sank into the couch, resting his elbows on his knees. "This didn't start today," he said quietly. "She's been struggling for a long time. She just didn't know how to say it." His wife looked down, embarrassed, but he gently took her hand to reassure her. The older woman eased into her armchair, listening carefully. "You know how she always tries to handle everything on her own," he continued. "How she insists she's fine, even when we can clearly see she's tired." The older woman nodded. She had noticed that. The younger woman always smiled, always pretended everything was under control, even on days when she looked exhausted. "Well," he said softly, "that's because she's been trying to live up to expectations she thinks everyone has of her." His wife swallowed, tears forming again. But she didn't interrupt him. He continued, his tone gentle. "She's been feeling that no matter how much she does, it's never enough. She wants to be helpful, respectful, responsible. But people sometimes say things without thinking, and she takes every word to heart." The older woman lowered her gaze. She knew this was true not only for her daughter-in-law, but for many people in the family. Little comments that were meant casually sometimes carried heavier meanings for those already struggling. "But there's something else," the son added quietly. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She's been worried about you too." "Mum." The older woman looked up, startled. "About me," he nodded. "She thinks she hasn't done enough to make you feel comfortable with her. She thinks you see her as someone who doesn't fit into our family." The younger woman shook her head, wiping her eyes. "I never wanted you to feel that I was distant," she told the older woman. "I just didn't want to bother you. You've always been strong and independent. I didn't think you needed anything from me." The older woman felt her throat tighten. It had never occurred to her that the younger woman had been trying to respect her space. But maybe she had gone too far in the other direction. Her son continued. "She's been trying so hard to balance everyone's expectations that she forgot it's okay to ask for help. And today, everything just stacked up. The unkind comment, the missed calls, the silence. It pushed her to her breaking point." His wife took a shaky breath and nodded. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't pretending. For the first time, the older woman saw the full picture, something she hadn't understood before. Not just the shouting, not just the pounding on the door, but the deeper story underneath. A young woman trying to fit in. A son trying to balance peace and support. A mother, unknowingly distant, causing silent misunderstandings. The older woman leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "Both of you should have told me sooner," she said. "I can't help with what I don't know." Her son nodded. His wife nodded. It wasn't blame, it was an invitation to start fresh. The truth was out now, not the kind that causes more arguments, but the kind that leads to healing. And for the first time all night, all three of them felt a small, quiet sense of relief. The room felt different, now quieter, almost as if the walls themselves were relieved that the truth had finally been spoken aloud. But the older woman knew that one conversation wasn't enough to erase years of unspoken feelings. She could see it in her daughter-in-law's trembling hands, and in her son's heavy shoulders. There were emotions sitting in the room that had been building long before this night. The older woman took a slow breath and looked at her daughter-in-law with a gentle expression. "Come sit next to me," she said softly. The young woman hesitated for a second, then slowly moved toward the armchair. The older woman reached out and held her hand, something she had never done before. The daughter-in-law looked surprised, almost as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to accept the comfort. "You've been carrying far too much on your own," the older woman said. "Why didn't you tell me you felt this way?" The young woman's eyes filled again. "I didn't want to seem weak," she whispered. "Everyone looks at me like I should already know everything: how to manage a household, how to behave, how to talk to relatives. I thought asking for help would make me look like I didn't belong." The older woman shook her head slowly. "Belonging doesn't come from being perfect," she said. "It comes from being honest." Her son leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "She felt like she had to impress everyone," he explained. "Every visit, every family dinner. She told me she felt judged every time she didn't do things the way other people expected." His wife nodded quietly. "I felt like an outsider," she admitted. "I didn't want to disappoint you, and every time I thought someone was unhappy with me, I tried even harder. But the harder I tried, the more pressure I felt." The older woman listened carefully. She thought back to birthdays, holidays, small gatherings. She remembered times when she saw her daughter-in-law hurrying around, trying to make sure everything was perfect. She had thought it was simply eagerness to help. She never imagined it came from a place of fear. "You shouldn't have to impress me," the older woman said. "You're part of this family. That's enough." The young woman lifted her eyes, unsure whether to believe her. "And I should have said that sooner," the older woman added. "Maybe then you wouldn't feel so alone." A long, fragile silence passed, one that said more than any argument could. Then the son spoke again. His voice lowered this time. "Mum, I didn't tell you this earlier, but she's been having a hard time at work too. Long hours, constant expectations, very little appreciation. It's been wearing her down, little by little." The older woman nodded, absorbing the weight of it. It wasn't just one comment from the aunt. It wasn't just missed calls. It wasn't just loneliness. It was everything. All at once. Day after day. And tonight had been the moment. Her heart couldn't hold it anymore. "I'm sorry I scared you," the daughter-in-law said softly. "I didn't mean to shout. I didn't even want to come here like that. I just felt like I was failing at everything, and I didn't know how to calm myself." She wiped her face with her sleeve, "And when no one picked up the phone, I thought maybe no one needed me." The older woman placed her other hand over the younger woman's. "You're needed," she said firmly. "More than you know. But you have to let us be here for you." Her son nodded in agreement. "You don't have to hold everything inside anymore. Not with us." The daughter-in-law breathed out a deep, shaky breath that seemed to release weeks, maybe months of pressure. Her shoulders relaxed just a little, and for the first time all night, she looked less like someone breaking apart, and more like someone finally being understood. The older woman realized that tonight wasn't about stopping a problem. It was about finally seeing it. And now that the truth was out, something important was happening. They were healing, together. The night had started with a pounding on the door, a wave of panic, and emotions too strong to control. But now, The atmosphere inside the house felt gentler still, fragile, but no longer filled with fear or misunderstanding. Instead, it held something new, a quiet closeness that hadn't existed before. The older woman stood up slowly. "I think we all need something warm," she said. Heading toward the kitchen, her son and daughter-in-law followed, not wanting to sit apart anymore. The kitchen light was soft, and the air smelled faintly of the tea she had made earlier. She put water on the stove, and the gentle sound of the flame filled the silence in a comforting way. No one spoke for a moment. It wasn't awkward anymore, it was peaceful. When the tea was ready, the older woman poured 3 cups and set them on the table. Her son pulled out a chair for his wife, and she gave him a small, grateful smile. A simple gesture, but after tonight, it felt meaningful. They all sat down. For the first time, the daughter-in-law looked calm. Her eyes were still tired, but no longer clouded with panic. She held the warm cup between her hands and exhaled slowly. "I didn't realize how much I needed this," she said quietly. Not the tea. Just being heard. The older woman reached across the table and lightly touched her hand. "And I didn't realize how much you were holding inside," she replied. "Thank you for trusting me tonight even if it didn't start calmly." The daughter-in-law gave a tiny, embarrassed laugh. "I'm sorry about that. I really am. It's all right," the older woman said. "Sometimes emotions get too heavy. We all have those moments." Her son squeezed his wife's shoulder gently. "You're not alone anymore," he reminded her. "Not in anything," she nodded, her eyes softening. "And I won't pretend anymore," she said. "I'll talk to you both when things get too much. I don't want to break down like this ever again." The older woman smiled warmly. "Talking early is better than exploding late," she said kindly. "We'll face things together from now on." After finishing their tea, they spent another hour simply talking about work, about family expectations, about simple fears they had kept to themselves. There were no raised voices, no hidden emotions. Every word felt lighter than the last dot. Eventually, the older woman looked at the clock and realized how late it had become. "You two should get home soon," she said gently. "It's a long drive." Her son stood and nodded. "We'll head out," he said, "but we'll come see you again tomorrow." His wife stood too, wiping her hands on her sleeves. "Thank you for opening the door," she said. "Even after everything, thank you for listening." The older woman stepped closer and gave her a careful hug, one that was soft, comforting, and full of reassurance. "You're always welcome here," she whispered. Always. When they finally walked out, the porch no longer felt tense or heavy. The crowbar, still lying on the side, looked almost out of place, now like a forgotten object from a moment that had passed. The older woman bent down, picked it up, and handed it to her son. "You won't need this again," she said with a small smile. He laughed quietly. "I hope not." As they headed to their car, the daughter-in-law turned back and waved softly. There was a delicate, grateful expression on her face, one that showed relief, understanding, and maybe even the beginning of a stronger bond. After they drove away, the older woman stepped back inside. She locked the door gently, not out of fear, but simply out of habit. She walked to her armchair and sat down, feeling both tired and peaceful. She looked around the living room and whispered to herself, "Tonight could have ended badly, but instead, it brought us closer." She realized something important, something she hadn't noticed until now. Sometimes, the loudest moments in life aren't signs of anger. They're signs of someone asking to be understood. And tonight, that understanding had changed everything. The house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't the quiet of loneliness, it was the quiet of healing.